Everybody has a copy of Steering and Suspension Test 4 here. Once the center mounting nut is removed from a steering wheel, the wheel should easily slip off the shaft. Now, Daniel has experienced both of those, I think. The one that you took apart was that Chrysler 300. They had to put the turn signals wouldn't cancel, and he had to put a clock spring on it because the little part that cancels it was built into there. And when he pulled the retaining, it just came off real easy. And they do on some of them. On some of the other ones, you got to use a puller. Usually what I've been able to do mostly for if you got some beef in your shoulders and all that, is you can pull this way and that way and this way and that way and this way and that way, and about the time you give up on it, it'll go boom, pop off in your hand. But that's usually not, I mean, I say that. You can do it, if you're pretty strong, you can do it that way about probably 70% of the time. The other part of the time, you got to have a puller to pull it off or something like that. So, you know, it won't always come off like that.
So false.
I have actually put my knee against the bottom and my handle against this and get an air hammer with the nut. Just start it on it, go, and it'll pop off. But I mean, it's really a good best idea to use a puller if you don't want to destroy something. False is the right answer to that. I mean, false with conditions. That's what Daniel was going to say, because he's had one that just pulled off there real easy. The two main types of steering gear systems are rack and pinion and worm and roller. No, that's not true. I mean, that's not. Most passenger vehicles have rack and pinion steering. That is true nowadays. There was a time when it was not true. I remember long years ago, somebody was talking about, I mean, guys, this was like 1973. Somebody said something about rack and pinion steering. I said, well, what's so special about that? I mean, you know, because I didn't at the time even know what he was talking about, you know, and he was trying to explain that it gives you better handling and all that. The reason that it's got fewer moving parts, and it basically is a lot more hookup, you know, straight between you and the wheels. You got more road feel, and there's a bunch of reasons for it. But it's typically a better deal because it's less. Now, I mean, forevermore they've been trying to make cars lighter. The component's not as heavy. And my shop foreman one time was telling me that whenever there was one particular engine that Ford was building, and they managed to build an oil pump that would do the same job but weighed 4 ounces less than the other oil pump, and they threw a big party. They was trying to make everything lighter and lighter and lighter. That's why you're seeing so much plastic on these cars nowadays, you know. Of course, General Motors for a while had some plastic oil pans, and that's just really not a good idea. If you hit a rock on a cold morning with a plastic oil pan, you're going to see some oil get going in a hurry. But that didn't last long, you know. You know, gas tanks, yeah, but not, you know. Okay, pressure generated by a power steering pump may reach recirculating, number 4, recirculating ball steering systems have fewer parts and therefore weigh less and require less space than rack and pinion systems. That's totally false. Number 5, though, pressure generated by a power steering pump may reach 2,000 psi, which is correct. Usually it's around 1,200, you know, when it's just doing normal steering stuff. That's been my experience. But I will tell you this, you won't hardly ever see anybody with a gauge to measure the pressure that a power steering pump puts out. I mean, there is tests for that and all that, but I mean, you can actually go so deep testing that you're wasting time, with all due respect. I mean, engineers test for that kind of thing, but a mechanic, if you can tell if the power steering ain't working right and the pump's noisy and it ain't got a lot of air in it, you know, you just need to put a pump on it. I have seen some of these General Motors power steering pumps that would be full of fluid, and they would be spinning free. They'd have a good belt on them, but they wouldn't have no power steering. Power steering would be just totally defunct. So you put a power steering pump on those. I mean, like if you'll see, like you ain't got no power steering. It's just like, you know, just like you're. Now I'd be well, the one that I saw was GM. I guess any of them can do it. But we had a Pontiac Montana in here that was like that one day. I mean, no leaks anywhere, full of fluid. Pump was spinning real smooth, but it didn't have nary a bit of. And it's a vane pump, is what it is. You know, I mean, a vane pump has got little veins that sling out against egg-shaped inner, and the oil comes in on one side and goes out on the other. You know, it's really not that complicated. It's like a hydraulic pump on a forklift or something like that. But anyway, in most cases, an electric motor drives the power steering pump. Not most cases, Now, on Daniel's car, an electric motor helps him turn the wheel. So he got electric power steering, and there's actually a recall on all that cobalt. Front wheel alignment is necessary after any front wheel steering component replacement. that says true, and basically, can you think of a front end steering component you would replace that wouldn't require an alignment after having replaced it?
You mark everything out, it might not be totally necessary.
Huh?
Let's see. That Ford wouldn't require it.
Yeah, like if you put maybe like a
Alarm or
spindle maybe on there, which is where the bearing is and all, or anything. No, your that one there, your Ford Ranger has actually got a drag link, and the adjustments on both sides of it. Just about every part you replace, except with the possible exception of ball joints, you can replace lower ball joints without having to do an alignment, typically, because you're not changing anything. Now, the right answer for this question, if you want to get it right according to the answer key, is true. But it says front end alignment is necessary after any front steering component replacement. You could build a case for that if you decided you wanted to. But like I say, when you're putting ball joints on there, the bottom ball joint, if you didn't remove the control arm or nothing like that, you're not typically not going to change anything unless there was and a lot of the time we change ball joints because they're squeaking. The boots are gone, and not because they're wallered or loose or anything, because they're just making a lot of racket whenever you turn them. All of the struts is another thing that you typically are going to have to adjust it unless there's no adjustment on them. Some struts you replace, they don't have any adjustment. All the following are major components of a steering system except, this is one of MASC style questions. Well,
steering valve.
Steering valve. That sounds, like something somebody made up, don't it? Maybe that's a minor component. I used to just write questions off the top of my head when I first came here because I didn't have any tests already made up. And I used to make up answers. Like one time I called something a heated hydrocarbon vent. Sounds real good, but no such thing. And the guys were scratching their heads about that. The housing that contains and supports the steering shaft is called the what?
Column?
The steering column.
into that steering housing there and throw you out one.
Yeah, pretty much. You'll call it the column. Have you guys ever seen a steering column that would go to the side?
You mean slides left and right?
Yeah, slide to the left and right, so you can slide the steering wheel over to the right so you can get out of the car easier.
Dodges, there's one part of that. What was it?
66 Thunderbird
Thunderbird?
would do that, yeah. And if you ever sit down in a 66 Thunderbird, you'll think you're in Star Wars or something. Man, that thing was like a rocket ship in there, the way the controls and the gauge and all. Wow, it's really something.
Doors open up funny too.
Yeah. Yeah, but it had stuff up here that you did, buttons you pushed up here and all that kind of stuff, like you were flying an aircraft or something. But the steering wheel would go to the right when you let out. On your old Edsels, the gear shift buttons, you ever seen push button gears?
Yes.
All right, the gear shift buttons on the Edsel was in the middle of the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And sometimes whenever they wouldn't go in gear, there was a motor on the side of the transmission that was supposed to put it in gear. You'd have to beat that motor with a hammer to get it to move and all that kind of stuff. Of course, I ain't really that old. I just heard people talking about that. Okay, so let's see. Tie rod ends connect to what?
Ball socket?
Ball sockets.
Which end?
Yeah, really, which end? Ball sockets is right, but the idler arms tie rod ends don't connect to idler arms.
I thought the idler arm and the Pinion went to like the drag link.
It does, and the drag link connects to. Yeah, they do.
Okay.
You got an idler arm. You got an arm over here that's just kind of swinging, and it's hooked to that. And then you got your Pitman arm that actually turns the thing, and you got a drag link on the parallelogram drop, and then your tie rods hook up out here. See, and that's what makes that. Now there's variations of that. You know what I'm saying? Like this would be your idler arm. That would be your drag link, and then it'd be out here.
Like on Willie's, didn't the drag link just come off on either side of the Pitman arm?
Basically, it depends on the steering system. Typically, this is moving that and it's riding on this, you see. So this is like just a hinged thing. Now, these darn things here, if you buy one of these idler arms for your pickup truck, and you buy one of those, and I'm going to give a brand name here, DriveWorks, one of them cheap DriveWorks ones, I've seen those things last 2 weeks and get loose. and they look just as good as any other one when you put them on there, but they last about 2 weeks, and then they get so loose that they're plumb dangerous. And you put another one on there, because they give you another, they only cost $17, and the reason you only paying $17. And it lasts 2 more weeks, and then it gets loose again. You know, it's about what I go through. I don't know how they get away with selling something like that, but, you know, whatever. It's like if you're selling steering parts, they ought to be, you know, the steering parts that I like, if you're not going to go with the original equipment, is Moog, is good stuff. TRW makes good stuff. You know, these name brand stuff like that. There's other ones, too, that are good. Let's see. The number of degrees the steering wheel must turn in order to turn the road wheels 1 degree is called what? It's either going to be steering ratio. Steering ratio. And number 12. All of the following are components of a hydraulic power steering system except, come on guys, a master cylinder. Yeah, you're going to have hydraulic, you're going to have drive belts on hydraulic power steering. It's not going to be the master cylinder. Drive belt actually drives the power steering pump. Before performing a power steering pressure test, you must do all of the following except, well, you know you're supposed to inspect all hoses, tubes, and fittings. And are you supposed to run the vehicle so the fluid temperature becomes hot? No, not really. You are supposed to replace soft, brittle, or cracked hoses and replace rusted, dented, or cracked tubing. And remember the story I told you about the power steering hose for the Lexus? It cost $450. I remember talking about it a while back in here. You'll see power steering. If you see a power steering is leaking, we always like to turn the wheel and see if it squirts fluid everywhere when you turn in the wheel. You know, now the return line doesn't have pressure on it when you turn in the wheel. It's just got fluid going back. But a lot of the times you'll see power steering pressure lines fail. And some of those things are a booger bear to change out. Now, something else I want to say too, while I'm thinking about it, is a power steering line, a lot of times, will have a cooler. Either they'll, one of two ways. They'll have your power steering pressure line coming from the pump, and they'll have it going like this. And then it'll go to wherever it's going. It'll be a long thing. And they travel it through all that tubing with the air blowing on it while you're going down the road to cool it off, because when you pressurize fluid, you're heating it up. Got me? Sometimes, though, they'll have it going through a silly little cooler with fins on it. It'll go in, it'll come out. And it'll be a little bitty thing. It won't be very big. You know, it takes some cooling, but not a lot, you know. You don't ever see it going in a radiator or anything like that, because they don't need that, you know, kind of high pressure cooling. But just think about that. It does need to be cooled. Okay, number 14. When performing a power steering pressure test, the pressure gauge should be installed. Where would you put it? On the high pressure tube at the steering gear. That's where you're going to put it. You probably won't ever do that. I've even got a little VHS tape that's a snap-on study guide for the ASE test for power steering, and they go into a lot of detail on doing power steering pressure tests and all that kind of stuff. I've never seen anything about a power steering pressure test on an ASE test, with all due respect. And I've taken about 746,214 ASE tests. And anytime I miss a question, it's because the question was poorly written. Or sometimes it's just because I didn't know the answer. Okay. Hey, you guys are supposed to laugh. That was funny, okay? All right. Yeah. Where airbags are concerned, this is afternoon. Everybody's wore out, aren't they? Is there fresh coffee out there?
There's a little bit.
Oh, okay. A little bit of fresh coffee. Or you mean a little bit of old coffee that's been there since the morning? It's some of that Army coffee, isn't it? You know? All right. Where airbags are concerned, you always do what?
Store in a cool, dry location.
And you do not place them face down on the work table. You always place them face up on the work table. There's a couple of reasons why you don't place them face down. One reason is you don't want to scratch the surface of it. And that's not the main reason. The main reason is if somehow it manages to light off, it's going to go like 5,000 feet in whatever direction, you know, because it takes off like a artillery shell when it blows like that. We've blown them out here, but we don't ever lay them like this. If you're ever going to blow an airbag, you know, and sometimes you have an opportunity to do that because there's been a car that's wrecked and all that, so you blow the airbag, you know, you got to snip the little connector off of it, wire a couple of wires up to it, and speaker wires, what I use, we get way in here in the shop and put them out in the parking lot. And then you touch both sides to a battery and it goes boom! And, I mean, it will. I've seen them jump 10, 12 feet in the air and fill the whole parking lot up with smoke. We did a Cadillac passenger airbag, and that thing put out more doggone smoke. And I said, you know, if your windows was jammed and you couldn't let them down and you hit something, you would start, I mean, you'd asphyxiate from the doggone smoke the thing puts out. But anyway, it went way up in the air, and it shook the whole parking lot, you know, when it lit off. It's a big explosion. But if you put it upside down, it sounds like fun to do that, because you're thinking, I'm going to see how high in the air it goes. It's liable to rock over and come right at you, you know, at about 400 miles an hour. And that doesn't, you know, like something, you know, dangerous. So don't ever lay an airbag face down like that. Lay it face up, because if it lights off, you want the airbag just to go boom and jump up. You don't want it to rock off of something and go over there and, you know.
Take out something.
All right. So not everybody can be as fast as that guy. What was that guy on that movie, The Blind Side? You remember that?
Yeah.
That Blind Side movie? Yeah, he ran into that. He wrecked that truck, and he was fast enough to stop that airbag before he hits that boy. All right. Okay, number 15. Where airbags are concerned, always store in a cool, dry location. You don't want to store them where they're hot. Donnie was one day, he had an airbag, and he was in there, and there was this guy named Marvin Lampley that worked in the used car department. And Marvin says, how do you know that thing's not going to go off when you're holding it? And, you know, Donnie was just being kind of goofy. So he holds the airbag, and he says, well, it's not going to go off because I can show you, I can hit it on the back just like this. And every time he hit it, Marvin was thinking it was going to light off in his face, you know. Anyway, that's the end of that right now. And we got about 45 minutes before it's time to go home. Except Abby needs to leave at 3:20. And so we're all good to go. Turn in your test. Webb, you got some tests that you didn't turn in. Did you lose your papers or something? A couple of them? Make sure you do that.